Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shadows and Secrets Deep Dive series. I am Samantha Skal.
And I am Kerry Savage. And together we are Shadows and Secrets, a series of retreats and an online community for mystery, thriller, suspense, and horror authors.
You can find out more at shadowsandsecrets.com.
Ooh. So we are both book coaches and authors, and we love talking about story. This is our series of spoiler alert, big
Spoiler
time
alert.
spoiler alert, deep dives into scary books that we love, where we talk about the twists, structure, masterful misdirection, villains, and anything else that strikes our fancy about MTS, which is the overarching genre term for mystery, thriller, and suspense. But first, I would like to introduce my co-founder of Shadows and Secrets, Sam. Tell the people a little bit more about what you do as a book coach, Sam.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Carrie. This is such a natural way of speaking.
Of course.
So I am a writer and a book coach who loves working with writers to make their stories come to life. I love working with thriller, mystery, and suspense authors, particularly, and horror, to plan and write twisty novels. And I especially dig brainstorming twists and villains.
Yes, it's your superpower, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yes. So,
You gonna tell them
I
about
am.
you? Yeah.
I suppose we're so good at these transitions these days.
Welcome to
So
December.
right, exactly. Oof. So hi everybody. I am Carrie. I am also a writer and a book coach, and I love working with writers to bring really super immersive settings and details to life in a book's world. I geek out on story just like Sam does, and yeah, I think that I'm a little bit more of a magpie than Samantha is
Yeah.
too, but that's why
Yeah.
we work so well together.
hmm All right. So, as a reminder, we are going to be giving away everything today, including key plot points. So, if you haven't read today's book, please hit pause, go and read it, and then come back. We don't want to spoil anything for you.
No, we don't. And we are very, very serious when we say that. There is no secret that we leave unturned, so please consider this your final spoiler alert warning. The structure of these talks is going to be the same every single time. We read the book jacket copy and we talk about what the author has done to manipulate us before we even start.
And then we will read the first page and what the author has done to manipulate us there.
And then we break down each of the major twists in terms of how the author did it, what percentage of the way through it happened, and what on screen clues existed so that the twist worked.
And then we are going to talk through how the author accomplished the overall misdirection and manipulation of the reader, which is a hallmark of thriller, mystery, and suspense, and the way they used language or setting or other elements to set the reader up for maximum fear.
And that's why we read the scary shit, right? Because we love to be scared by fiction.
It sure is. All right, are we ready?
Yes, we sure
Okay.
are.
So today's book is The Last Session by Julia Bartz. This is the cover. It's uh, just yeah. What a book this was.
Yes.
I really loved it. I read this like, I don't know, a year ago, and it is so unhinged and delightful. And I finished reading it and was like, Carrie, we have to talk
Mhm.
about this. So Julia Bartz, thank you so much for writing this book. What a just thank you. I read it at a time when I really needed a distraction, and you provided it, and I'm just so grateful to you for writing this story. So,
Yes.
um, do you want me to read the book jacket copy, or do you want to read it?
It's up to you. Well, yeah, we didn't talk about this beforehand, obviously. So, I
Sure
think you did it
didn't.
last time. So, do you want me to do it?
Sure, yeah, do it.
All right. So, we'll start with there's a little bit of editorialization. This is the book jacket copy from my Kindle version of this book. So, I assume it's probably pretty similar in the hard copy as well. But the instant New York Times bestselling author of The Writing Retreat, quote, weaves psychology and mysticism into this strikingly original, unquote, and that's from Anna Reyes, who's also a New York Times bestselling author.
Great
Um,
writer.
yeah. Thriller about a social worker who, after coming face to face with her dark past, must infiltrate a mysterious wellness center in the deserts of New Mexico. When a catatonic woman shows up at her psychiatric unit, social worker Thea swears that she knows her from somewhere. She's shocked to discover the patient holds a link to a traumatic time in her own past. Upon regaining lucidity, the patient claims she can't remember the horrific recent events that caused her brain to shut down. Thea's at a loss, especially when the patient is ripped away from her as suddenly as she appeared. Determined to find her, Thea follows a trail of clues to a remote center in southwestern New Mexico, where a charismatic couple holds a controversial monthly retreat to uncover attendees' romantic and sexual issues. Forced to participate in increasingly intimate exercises, Thea finds herself inching closer not only to her missing patient, but also to tantalizing answers about her own harrowing past. However, time is running out, and if she stays for the last session, she too might lose her sanity and maybe even her life.
Hmm.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, so very well done, book jacket copy, and I
Mhm,
assume part of the query, right? Like the fact we get to that final sentence of like, we're facing life and death stakes,
mhm,
hallmark of MTS. We always try to
mhm.
get there, or we do get there in the query and book jacket copy. But it's interesting how they framed it because like the inside, like I did our normal thing,
Mhm.
inciting incident, story question, midpoint, climactic twist, final twist, emotional aha, all of that. And the inciting incident is something I very much would like to talk through with you, but just
Okay.
from the book jacket copy, what would you assume it was? If,
The inciting incident?
yeah,
Um, I would say when a catatonic woman shows up at her psychiatric unit. So it
yeah,
would be Catherine showing up.
yeah.
Um,
I agree, but
that's
it's
what I would
also
take from
like,
this book jacket copy anyway. And I
right.
think that's what I think is the inciting incident too,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had it that it's when Thea decides to go after her after she disappears. Um,
which happens a little bit later,
it does
right?
happen a tiny bit later, but it
Yeah, then we would
works, right?
normally, what I'm saying, when
Right.
we normally expect it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the other question I have for you is the story question.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from the book jacket copy, I would think it would be something more to do with Thea and her finding out what happened to her. But when you read the book, I would argue that the story question is more about like what happened to Catherine and, how that affects Thea. But it's interesting,
Interesting.
right?
I mean, I think I would struggle with that story question only because it doesn't center on the protagonist. You
Exactly.
know, like you would say that Thea is the protagonist, right? Catherine is
Absolutely. Yeah.
obviously an incredibly important character, but
Yeah.
Thea is our guide through this journey. And
Yeah.
by that measure, we would consider her the protagonist. So maybe I'm just so partial to being like that the story question has to be about the protagonist. Although this is not a mystery, there is a mystery we are trying to solve, but this
Yeah.
is not a straight mystery.
No, it's a
So,
thriller.
in a straight mystery, who killed so and so being the story question, that's not necessarily about the protagonist. That is about the murder. Um, so yeah, that's
Interesting, right?
interesting.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
want to
because
noodle
yeah,
on
let's
this as we
noodle on it.
talk.
I mean, from the last sentence, which is where we all often get the story question, it might not always be in question form, but that's often where you'll find it in book
Hmm.
jacket copy. And this, however, time is running out, and if she stays for the last session, nice way to work in the title there, by the way.
Yeah.
She too might lose her sanity and maybe even her life. So from there, it would be like, well, does she survive? Was the
Right.
story question that immediately
Ah,
leads me again, just in based on this book
yeah.
jacket copy.
Yeah.
I don't know if that ultimately. I think you could argue that that is the story question for the book.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and we're well past the like we've given 12 million spoiler alerts, so I guess I will feel fine in saying like we don't know what's going to happen when she goes in the hole when she gets shoved into the hole,
No.
whether
No.
she will survive or not. I mean,
Yeah.
we assume in some ways that she will because she's our protagonist, but how does she survive?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting.
Mm.
I just my my instinct with the story question is like, like we've talked about in the past, like we seek to answer the story question in the climactic scene.
Hmm.
And what happened to Catherine is answered earlier than that, right?
Hmm.
Like she has the realization that Catherine was shoved into the hole once she's in the hole, which happens
Hmm.
around the climactic scene.
Hmm.
But the climactic scene is very long, right? Like
Hmm.
we
It's
have a
another one of
series of
those.
events where it's just like this is really a series of shitty events. And then the climactic confrontation is very much agency filled from
Hmm.
Thea's perspective, which is awesome.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the story question for me on this one just wasn't super clear. I mean, I
Hmm.
think does she survive this is great. That would be a reasonable question to have answered, but you know, I guess I like story questions to be a little bit more like it's not just a yes or a no. It's like it's answering a deeper question of what happened or what's really going on or I don't know.
Well, there's a difference, I think, or there can be a difference between the way sometimes I think of a story question, which to me, again, maybe this is a little different, is very plot driven when we
Yeah.
talk about it, versus what I'm going to use terminology that I don't know if is original to CC Lyra, but like this is where I've most recently heard it, which is like the major dramatic question, which I think
Hmm.
is more tied to what you're getting at, which is like part also wrapped into the emotional aha. Like,
Yeah.
so what's more, that's more the internal character arc question
Yeah.
versus the story question being very plot driven. Is
Yeah.
and again, it's subtle. Sometimes they are one and the same. Sometimes they're not. Um, so
Okay.
we'll keep talking
Keep
about it as we
talking. We'll
get
keep
more
talking.
into the nuts and
Yeah.
bolts.
All right. So I'm going to read the prologue, which is 2 pages on my Kindle. And I'm just going to read the first page because we get a lot of what we need to in that first little bit. And I do firmly agree with the choice to have a prologue with this one. It's another
Yes.
one where, it sets us up for the expectation that there's going to be something gnarly that happens to this character. It's all in first person. We don't know, you know, man, woman, like we don't know much. We just are I, which I think in a prologue is so effective because
Mm.
we're focused on the fear. We don't really need too much or anything about who this person is. We just need the emotion to get us into the vibe of like, okay, this is a thriller, right? We're about to
Yep.
enter this story. And then, when we get to part one, chapter one, we learn who she is and we learn what's actually going on, and we're dropped right into her day job as a therapist in an inpatient unit.
Hmm.
So, here's page one of the prologue. This is a womb. That's the image I cling to now, and the only one that keeps me from screaming. So good. My voice is long since gone. My throat is raw and burning, and I keep bending over the ledge, cupping the cold water to my mouth to soothe it. I drink until my belly distends and I vomit most of it back up. There's no comfortable position, but it feels best to squeeze myself into a ball, listening to the rushing water thundering through the tiny chamber. We don't know. We assume cave, right? You're kind of getting that vibe, but like it's just so scary. Like rushing
Hmm.
water, tiny chamber, no comfortable position, like
Your
throat
throat's
raw from
raw from
screaming.
screaming. Yeah.
Ah! Okay, right over there, much too close, is the body. Normally it
Hmm.
remains underneath the water, waterlogged, but every so often the current pushes it back up. The water's cold, so it's decomposing slowly, but there's still a stench. So this person's been in there long enough to know that there's a pattern to the body being submerged and coming back up.
Hmm.
Since I first explored this place by touch, I was confused when my fingers met the rancid jelly-like mass. Ugh. Then I realized what was in here with me. At that moment, sheer horror overtook me, and I tried to force myself back through the tunnel I'd come out of, almost drowning myself in the process. Sputtering, swallowing, coughing. The current was superhuman, pushing me back like a hand. I knew even as I struggled that it was pointless. I was trapped. How long have I been down here? There's no way to know, but it feels like days, weeks. After the initial shock and terror, anger started buzzing through my body, battling the cold that numbed my fingers and toes. I replayed the scene over and over, standing at the lip of the hole with the others, my chest squeezing in sadness and fear. I hadn't wanted her to go in, but it was what she'd decided. Only she tricked me. They all did. As she walked up behind me, I didn't even turn, and then two warm palms on my lower back, shoving me into the swirling void. So like there's a lot given away with
Hmm.
this, right? And so when we hop to chapter one and we meet Thea and she's not in this cave, we know immediately that this whole story is going to be tracking to that moment.
Hmm.
But even as I say that, we could be we could be wondering in the prologue whether or not this is her or another character.
So I had this note, and I go through and read my notes or write my notes on my second read. So it's a little bit, but I was having these thoughts as I was doing the first read. We don't know. We deliberately don't know who is in the cave. It's just I, as you said, first
Hmm.
person. And as you make your way through the book and you go through these touch points, you realize like there's callbacks to Grace there's callbacks to Catherine. There's callbacks to even Nadia at some point, to the
Mhm.
extent that you wonder, oh, like we're in this cave in this situation again. Like, was that moment in the prologue? Was that Grace? Like, was it
Right.
Catherine? Was it Nadia? Like, and until you actually find out more and more about what happens, you're not sure whose POV we're actually in that
Yeah.
moment. And I think like that is like, wow, that was pretty cool to be able to use an impactful prologue that launches you into the story the way it does, and then to be able to call back to it to keep the reader questioning. Even though we're consistently, with I think one chapter's exceptions worth, we're consistently in Thea's point of view, you're still wondering, like, well, it could have been any of these people, really,
Mhm.
until the moment where Thea goes in
Yeah.
the hole.
Right. Right. Yeah,
um,
I adore this kind of tension at the beginning of a story
mhm,
where, it's a classic for a reason. It's again based on fear, and we get this like, okay, we know this is going to happen to someone,
mhm.
and we don't know who. I mean, I can't remember what I thought the first time I read it. And this is the thing about mystery thriller and suspense is like once you read it once, it's really hard to go back and remember like this is what I thought at this time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like you, I take notes on the second read. Because I'd already read this. And so
Right.
by the time we decided to do the deep dive on it, it was like I already knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but I just think it's so powerful to start something where there's so much visceral description and emotion, and we feel it, and we tense up, right? When we're reading and we're
Hmm.
like, oh my God, is she going to get out of this? We don't know. We think maybe not. But then we go back and we're like, okay, whatever, a month earlier, 2 weeks or whatever. I don't think we actually know the time frame. It just says part one. So we
Yeah.
don't even know if this is before or after or what's going on.
Mhm.
Um, it's really well done. It just really
Yeah, and
sets the tone.
as you said, it gives enough away so that you're immediately starting from this point of suspense.
Hmm.
This is going to happen. We don't know to who or when, and the juicy bits are like the how the hell did we get here? How did
Yes,
like we end up in this character who's in this cave that is full of water and a dead body? Like, oh my God. So it's
yeah,
not, you haven't given away the game. You've actually given away just enough to have us be like, well, now I need to know like how the hell all of this happened.
totally, totally. And that's what we're going for with mystery thriller and suspense,
Yes.
right? Is in any book, but like you want the reader to be like, well, now I have to know what happens and keep reading. Like the
Hmm.
goal is to suck them in and then not let them go until you are done with them at 3 a.m. and they've stayed up way too late. And yeah,
Right. So, I mean, this definitely is solidly a thriller. I would never make the argument otherwise. But I think too, like the first sentence in my notes is, I swear this book has horror elements in it. To me, reading the
yeah,
prologue, I got like big time horror vibes. And I know like one of the hallmarks of horror is like chaos stays like
yeah.
maybe you think order has come and then it goes back into chaos, which we do not have here. Our ending is resolved as we would expect in a thriller. But do you like especially the cave stuff and also layered into like the supernatural paranormal kind of woo things that are happening?
Yeah.
Did you get those horror vibes too, or was it
Oh,
just
for
me?
sure. For sure. And
Okay.
this is part of the fun of the modern MTS genre is
Yeah.
you can have all these elements of, and like any
Hmm.
book can bring in thriller elements, any book
Oh,
can bring
sure.
in a mystery, suspense. All books should have suspense, in my humble opinion.
Yes.
But, you know, I think I think the fact that we're tapping into those horror things and like how gnarly it gets,
Hmm.
it's yeah, absolutely
Because
agreed.
there's a lot of body stuff happening in this book, not in
Mhm.
a body horror kind of way specifically, but like there's also a lot of like there's real vulnerability that's being brought onto the page.
Yeah.
And I just realized that I showed a big psychic bit about myself because like vulnerability equals horror. Okay, Carrie,
Yeah.
didn't realize this is going to be a therapy session.
But
But I do think
totally.
that contributes to it, that like there
Yeah.
is a lot of, it's that intense therapy environment where you're getting very, very personal with people and hitting vulnerable spots in a very short period of time. And that brings up a lot of things for a lot of people,
Well, that
obviously.
is
So,
very well observed.
oh, thank
Absolutely
you.
agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it like that, but you're totally right that that is part of I mean, there's obviously tension, right? So
Yes.
like everyone here is listening has read it, but like as we go through these therapy sessions, what I thought was one of the like incredible choices that Julia Bartz made for the main character is to make the main character a therapist to translate for us what's
I
going on.
so smart. I actually don't think
So
it would have
smart.
been nearly as good if she
Uh-uh.
had done it otherwise.
I completely agree. Like, because we need that translation, we in order to
Totally.
understand the horror of what's happening, right?
Yep.
And so if I'm not a therapist and I watch someone have some breakthrough, I'd be like, great, right? But she tells us in her inner thought and her interiority about why this is so horrific and why this is not the way that people typically do things, but also
Hmm.
describes constellation therapy and like this other stuff without being over the top explainy,
Hmm.
just enough so we
Wasn't
get
an
it.
info dump
Uh-uh.
ever.
But you feel, I mean, I feel like I learned something. I haven't
Hmm.
actually Googled constellation therapy, but I assume it's a real thing.
I'm
And,
sure it is.
why it worked, and then because Thea is the last person to go, we are leading up to this last session,
Hmm.
the entire, for the first half of the book. And the exact midpoint, um, slow clap, Julia Bartz, is when she relives what happened
Her
to her
trauma.
to her trauma. That's exactly 50%. And then she has a
Yeah.
calm at having shared what's going on, which is incredible.
I think because this book, especially in the second half, with everything that happens, with the shared delusion amongst some of the group of folks, because it. I'm going to say this and then I will follow up what I mean by it because it could be like it could go off the rails really easily with this shared delusion. The fact that Thea is able to be the character and we are in her shoes and seeing it through her eyes and she can stay grounded through it. She doesn't always make decisions I agree with, but of course, like that is a protagonist's
Yeah.
that's why we read.
Yeah.
Um, but she can stay grounded enough to explain, as you just said, so well, what exactly is happening in the therapy session, why it's working, and also why they're like jumping around and breaking all the rules. And it makes her
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but she also knows enough to know that it can be very powerful too. So
Yeah.
she brings us along with her in that way where I think if it were just a me type character, like some chick who met this other chick and was out there to help her or whatever and didn't recognize it in the same way, I'd be like, what are you doing? And I don't know if I would have been on the ride or have bought in to the scenario quite as well as if there wasn't a Thea there to walk me through it. So
Totally. Yeah.
really
It's
smart
just
choice.
really, really and very intentional, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
it had to have been.
Yeah.
Um, so since we're on the midpoint, I'll just
Yeah.
mention that was exactly 50%. We end that chapter at 50% where she is calm and having shared. And
Hmm.
then like 2 pages later, 3 pages, whatever, I have it at 52%. We find out that Mickey, another person who's at the retreat, is a journalist
Hmm.
and that Moon, the leader, is faking a Mexican accent, was a yoga teacher in LA. Like all of it's a fraud, basically, right? And so then the story completely changes. We see that two other people, Clint and Karen, are in the pictures of the previous retreat, so they are not new. Clint being the fake dad, right? Or the no, the
No,
fake
fake
therapist,
therapist.
fake
Yeah.
therapist who tried to take Catherine away and or whatever in the beginning. Um, it just completely turns everything on its head. Everything that Thea
Hmm.
thought was going on is not what was going on. And that is just classic midpoint. Like,
Yeah.
we had some assumptions. It's a twist because we're revealing the truth, we're revealing an assumption that was incorrect. But it also makes perfect sense, because it's our things have already felt really squidgy. But she also just had this breakthrough. And so she's like, maybe these people actually know what they're doing. And then it's like, no, they don't. And that gets into the whole delusion thing. And part of you just made me think of what makes this so scary is this group delusion thing, and that Thea feels like the only sane person.
Hmm.
And then she starts questioning her reality and like, is this real? As you would, right? Like you're around all these
Well,
people who are like, we're a part of this reincarnation of this thing, and we made it to a movie, and like, blah.
I mean, there's just enough that she questions her, she identifies for herself like, I know what's going on, I see what they're doing here, and I see why they're sucking people in, and she stays very rational on
Yeah.
one hand, but on the other hand there's just enough going on, and again you're in this super intense situation where we I think we all like to think, well, I would have gotten the hell out of there, like I'm smarter than that, blah 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 blah, but we've also I would imagine at least experienced, if not been a part of, but at least been a witness to times when the group delusion or the group momentum, the group
Mhm.
mentality kicks in. And it is a really scary thing that people, and it's been
Super
proven that
scary.
people will do things that they wouldn't normally do if they were just on their own. But because there's some sort of like group buy-in, that everybody goes ahead with what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what's going on here. And it seems like every time she thinks she has an ally
She
in
doesn't.
staying rational, I mean, Mickey is a journalist, but then she leaves. So that's go
Yeah.
and then every time she thinks she has someone, she doesn't, and or that person like Catherine isn't strong enough because of everything that they've done to break her down mentally to
Right.
actually have the agency that she needs to have. I mean, there is a point pre-climactic scene where Thea's like, "Come on, let's go! Like, we're gonna get out of here." Like,
Yeah.
let's. And Catherine's like, "Nope, it's too late. Sorry," because she's just been so broken down by all of it that
Yeah.
she can't bring herself to have the agency that she needs to. And Thea won't leave without her because that is like she's gotten stuck into. I need to get her out of here. I can't just leave for myself. I need
Right.
like there is a patient here who is suffering and needs serious psychiatric help, and I can't leave without her.
Right. Well, y- all of that, and also classic haunted house theme
Mm,
is that she
yeah,
can't leave,
of
right?
course.
Like they take away the keys. Like she gets Mickey and uh Ramit and Dawn out, right?
Hmm.
Like they all leave, but then Thea gets drunk and has an orgy with
So,
with Jonah, and like she misses the chance to leave in the car. Like everybody else left. And then there is no chance to leave and she is
yeah,
trapped. And so in this way, it is very haunted house
yeah,
classic. Like the only way through is out, or the only
right,
way out is through, right?
right,
And that in this case involves like murdering everyone because they aren't going to let her leave.
right.
Um, and in fact, they try to kill her because they're going to make her a sacrifice. And
Because
it's,
she's going to move humanity forward. This is the shared
yeah,
delusion. And I love that, I'm jumping ahead here now too, but Moon saying, like, well, I did all these bad things in a past life, but now you sacrificing yourself will make up for all the bad shit that I did. And Thea's like, whoa, 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 like, hold on a second. And Moon's like, no, 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 we're not, this isn't up for discussion. This is just how it's going to be. And thank you so much for your sacrifice.
yeah. No, it's great. I mean, I am not a religious scholar, but elements of, right? Like there's some
Sure,
bigger themes in here on that.
absolutely.
We tap into, she talks about like the sexual surrogacy that happened with her moving through her pain in this orgy, and like, that's not presented as like a bad thing particularly. Like Thea has
Right.
some questions about like, was that really what I wanted to do? But she also enjoyed it. And so, it was
Yeah,
very
it wasn't
consensual.
non-consensual.
No.
Even though everybody, the one thing I had around that, and this was not a knock by any means, but like, is
Yes.
everybody was so hammered that was anybody really consenting? But like, it wasn't. There was nothing hinky going on there, and
No.
I don't say this in any way to knock like consenting adults, do what you want to do, more power
Yeah.
to you. But the getting drunk thing was what made, like, you were so hung up on getting Catherine out. You had this plan with Jonah, and of course we
Right.
know, and we come to find out like that was never going to happen. But she didn't know that at the time. And
Right.
then, one glass of wine turned into wine and tequila and whiskey and all the things. And that was where I was just like, okay, this is a decision that I am like really actively mad at you for making.
Yeah, but I totally hear that, and I also think it made it real, right?
Yeah.
Like she had this incredibly intense thing happen to her. She was working through her own stuff. This felt right at the time,
Hmm.
like nobody
It
got
didn't
hurt.
necessarily, it was on the line for me of out of character, but it didn't
Yeah.
quite because Julia did set up that She had been drinking a lot before she
Yeah,
came to the retreat, and that was an emotional sort of crutch that she was using.
right,
So it,
right.
it wasn't out of character for her to do it, but I was just like, you picked the wrong freaking
I
moment, which
know.
was
I
very
know.
deliberate on their part, right? They knew exactly what they were doing.
Oh, they sure did. They sure
So,
did. Yeah, but it was, I guess my point is just like speaking of like the peer pressure and the group dynamics and stuff, like you
yeah,
can I had no problem imagining that while this was a terrible decision, it is a decision that would feel pretty easy to make in that space
yeah,
as
fair.
Thea, right?
Totally.
Um, yeah, I mean it sucks. You're just like shouting at the book, being like, oh,
Oh,
you could have gotten out.
stop!
Yeah, but it worked, and then she's trapped, and then we continue into this like increasingly more unhinged series of events that ends with
Mhm.
um Grace is the one who jumps in on her own, right?
Yep.
Yep. And then yeah, Grace jumps in, and then we have um Thea is trapped in the room, and we have there was this one line that I that I pulled out that Soul says the podcast is really going to take off. It's just like, and this is when we learn that like Soul and Moon are just 100% in it to like for their own gain. It's not because they
Well,
truly, well, they believe, but they also
Soul
don't.
is in it for his own gain. I think Moon actually believes all of this shit. I
Uh,
really do think that she was all in and committed and really believed,
that's
like,
true actually, because at the end, when Thea like tricks them into buying into their delusion, Moon makes the choice to, I mean, Catherine tries to stop her, but like they make the choice to jump.
hmm yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I think she was the true believer and Saul was just like in it for the money and power.
yeah, yeah. But it was a really good line. The podcast. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
horrific stuff happening. There's like people
Yeah.
trapped and like someone's just died in a cave and he's like,
hmm
the podcast is
But
really
the
gonna take
podcast is going to really take off. It's going to be amazing. Yeah.
incredible. Um, and we learn what really happened to Catherine in there.
Mhm.
We have Catherine's POV, which is where we learn that Moon was abusive and that they had a sexual relationship, and she would, that Talia, the ex, fell off a tower or possibly was pushed.
Oh,
Like,
I'm pretty sure she was pushed.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot that, I mean, I think the choice to have a Catherine POV chapter is a bold one.
Yes, I agree.
Not sure that I would have done that personally, but I do think having read it this way, it gives us a really interesting viewpoint into what we're dealing with.
Mhm.
As we understand as the reader how much increased danger Thea is in. We already knew she was in danger because she's trapped in a room and is being held hostage, basically.
Mhm.
But we kind of were on Moon's side, not on her side, but we were like, we get what you are, and we don't really think you're murderous because Grace
Oh,
makes
that's
the
so interesting. I
choice.
had a totally different read on her character.
I mean, she's a manipulator, and she presents herself in various ways that are not real to manipulate the world around her,
Hmm
but she didn't actively like push Grace. And I didn't get the impression that she was the one who killed Talia until we had the Catherine chapter. I guess it was like a deepening of her villainy for me with the Catherine
Yeah,
chapter where
okay.
it
I
worked
can, and
really,
it's
really
hard.
well.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, she always seemed super sketch to me.
So sketchy, but not
Maybe
quite a,
because the true believers are the ones that I feel like are even scarier than the
oh, 100%.
sharks.
Yeah, yeah. Like cult leader unhinged is terrifying. But it was interesting. Like without the Catherine chapter, I think I
Mhm.
wouldn't have understood the extent of what Thea needs to be scared of,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, I can see that for sure. When we learn the thing that's interesting about it, and like you said, a bold choice because that one chapter does so much work in giving us
Yeah.
in deepening how frightening Thea, like we realize then that Thea ought to be. So it's pretty packed for something that, I mean, it was a little longer than probably the typical chapter, but none of these chapters are long, and this book moves right along.
It did.
So it was a very interesting choice too, and we only get it the once, right? We only get
Also
like
only
there's
once, and
one
it's
POV
like,
chapter that way, and
and it's also like we see Thea be dropped into the hole, Karen slips or something, and then it's like Catherine chapter, right?
yeah,
So you are reading that chapter because you want to know what happens to
of
Thea, and
course.
you're like, you're in this terribly tenuous position where you probably are going to die. And then we're learning like what actually happened basically through Catherine. I think it's a very clever choice. It's a bold choice, but it's a clever one. And I really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, think about your alternative, like the ways that you would get that information to the reader in a different way. You'd
Have to
still
be
need Catherine on scene, right?
yeah,
So it would have to be pre-climactic scene or pre-Thea going in the hole, because it would have to be some kind of conversation between Thea and Catherine, or Thea overhearing Catherine talking to somebody, or I mean, it was just a really nice direct way to get it
yeah,
to the reader. And I think maybe it was a little bit easier to buy in because we have been set up in so many ways. Like these two people are twinning, right? So it's almost like Catherine is an extension of Thea in some ways.
yeah.
It's not like you just pulled us out and gave us, all of a sudden we're in Moon's point of view. Not saying that that
Right.
couldn't work too, but yeah, I think that's probably. I wonder if she tried it the other way of like getting it in and it just wasn't as
I
effective.
I suspect that this was not the first draft choice.
Yeah.
Or maybe Catherine had a POV throughout and we
Oh,
just ended up on this. I don't know. Julia Bartz, if you
interesting.
ever watch this and you want to let
Yeah.
me know,
Drop
I
a
would
line,
love to
let us
know.
know.
Um, but yeah, I thought it worked.
Oh, it
It
definitely, yeah, it
yeah,
works. It really,
it was
but it
great.
is not the choice that we would normally necessarily see people making and or
No,
recommend to someone, which
totally.
just goes to show what we say at least once a deep dive, which is if it works for the story, it works for the
It works.
story.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I want to go back to one thing on
Hmm.
the Catherine chapter in that time, but first I want to just go through like the climactic
Yeah.
twist and like the all of it. So, you know, she has this series of flashbacks when she's in the tunnel that are like very believable from somebody who's suffering from, not dehydration, but like hypothermia and,
She also has a head
hunger.
injury. They dropped her on her head,
Yes,
or she was when she was fighting back.
exactly.
So yes.
She's ill and it figures out she can't get back up the tunnel, and so then she's sort of facing like what happens now. And she has this thing with the snake spirit, and that gets into a little bit of the woo stuff that I want to talk about for sure.
Hmm.
um but a series of flashbacks and memories in Catherine's memories, in Moon's memories, like showing that interconnected woo thing. And then the emotional aha is so fascinating. um I thought it was when I pulled out this quote. So I'll just read it really quickly. I closed my eyes, pushing the hideous thoughts away, and suddenly a brilliant kaleidoscope of colors burst into existence, blinking and shifting. I was being shown something significant, but I couldn't quite grasp it. I marveled, taking it in. This is when she's like dying, right? She's given up.
Yeah.
There's something special about this place. Moon was right. But like the snake, it wasn't good or evil. Moon was the one who imbued it with her own psychic rage. And anger was fine. It was good even, but you couldn't get stuck there. Easy for me to say. I'd done the exact same thing. And I hadn't even realized the rage was there, buried under the surface. My desire to help covering up my desire to harm. The anger turning in on itself, working to destroy me with the societally approved poison of alcohol, with self-flagellation and shame. I'd told myself I was broken when I wasn't, not at all. I might have spent the rest of my life believing these lies. And so she like understands what she's done and has this moment of clarity about how she's lived her life and how she's not the broken one, she can make a choice, etc. And
Hmm.
then it's like she gives up, right? Because there is no other choice. And then Clint comes in and rescues her, which is not a like out of nowhere thing because,
It's been set up.
it's been set up so it works. Um, and then, when they get back up there, they get attacked again. They can't get out. A bunch of people die. Well, I don't really need to go into that. You've read the book. But at 93%, so the climactic, um, when she gets dropped into the hole, that's like 85% classic climactic confrontation, but not really. It's just she can't confront anything. What she does confront is the emotional aha and how it's like an internal confrontation, right?
Yeah, and I think like, well, that's where you said it's kind of a long climactic scene. I would
Yeah.
say it's actually, because when they first kind of tie her up and everything, and then they're waiting to do the last session.
Hmm.
Moon comes in, Jonah or Joe comes in, Soul, I think Soul comes in, maybe
They all are
Catherine
there.
too.
Yeah.
everybody comes in turn, and she tries to talk her way through all of this and using what she knows about each person. So it's like a series of confrontations, but they're
Yeah.
just mini, it's not all happening in one space, like one person at a time in the cave or something. But she is having those confrontations and working through some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It
not
is.
necessarily in a condensed way, classic, but it still is, it's all
Yeah,
happening.
she has as much agency as she is capable of having in the trapped situation. But
Considering she's handcuffed to a bed.
yeah, but she still has hope, right? Like until she gets dropped into the hole, she still has hope. The all is lost moment coincides with the emotional aha. So like all is lost, like I can't do
Mm-hmm.
anything. And then I have the realization. Then she gets rescued. And then we have this incredible agency where she knows what to do when she wakes up, right? And we need to continue to sacrifice all of us. She manipulates everybody. They go up on the tower, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, we have this wonderful line, I've broken the pattern, which means she is healed and like this retreat actually kind of worked, etc. Um, it works really well. There's not really like a final twist per se. I mean, Dawn and Ramit together was a little bit twisty. We don't expect it, but it's not related to the main plot.
It's more
Um,
like, oh, cute. I see what you did there, Julia Bartz, and that's
yeah,
fun. Not really a
yeah.
twist, I guess.
But like
Um,
Moon taking out Soul is unexpected, but that just
mhm.
feels like it's more of, the just it's how the climactic scene played out.
Well, and also I
Um,
think you could make the argument that Catherine taking out, I mean,
yeah,
it was a little ambiguous what exactly happened, but I
right.
choose to interpret it as Catherine finally getting back some agency, and in that moment being like, no, I'm not going to let you like kill anybody else. Like this
Yeah,
ends here with us. And yet and also I know I am too broken to be saved. So like, I'm just ending all of this. I'm putting a lot on a character that, we were
yeah,
not in her POV in that moment. So that's a lot of my stuff that I've ascribed to her. But, it wasn't, I don't think it was a given that, maybe what we're hoping for, because Thea has worked so hard and sacrificed so much, is that she will be able to get Catherine out. And that will be part of the outcome, is like Catherine goes to a hospital and gets the help that she
right.
needs. Nope, not what
Yeah.
happened.
No,
So,
it ends in chaos is brought to order, but
mhm.
there's a lot of people that have to die to get there.
Yeah.
Um, and interestingly, our conversation from the beginning with the story question, we do understand what happened to Catherine at 82% because we're in her POV.
Mhm.
And that is answered in the climactic series of events, ish.
Yeah. Ish.
But
Yeah.
it's because the reader is learning it at that time. So again, interesting choices. And
Mhm.
I felt satisfied, right? Which is
Yeah.
ultimately the goal.
Yep.
Um, okay, so now let's talk about the woo stuff because I think
Yeah.
that he played really well into this concept of like we have this connection with all these people that everyone, they're all buying into this delusion. But there is a single coincidence that, Thea calls out in the beginning where she's like, oh, this Stargirl movie, I've always felt connected to it, like her, the name, and like we don't, that is never explained because how could it be? And the fact that Catherine ends up in Thea's ward of all places in New York at the beginning, which is what kicks off the story, technically is a coincidence, which we try to avoid because it can feel a little bit easy, for lack of a better way of saying it. But with this, because there's all the woo stuff about how they're connected, it's like you kind of just accept it. You're like, okay, yeah. I mean, I don't need to totally understand it. This is a part of the lore of the story.
Well, I think because again, I'm going to go back to Thea as a character and the choices that Julia made with around her. The fact that she has Thea both questioning how much of this is actually real and how much of it is like bought into a shared delusion kind of thing, and also accepting it to a certain extent because she's experiencing it. I think and we are the surrogate, right? We are reading this
Yeah.
and seeing all of this through Thea's eyes. So I think no matter where you fall on the spectrum of the woo, she's at least giving you an opportunity to say, like, I'm holding space for both you questioners and both you and also you people who think like, oh yeah, like give me all the woo. I'm into it. This
Yeah.
is all this like this is this past life regression stuff and all this stuff is all
Yeah.
real and it's all happening. You know, um, I think it's a really it's that way you're like it's a big tent character in that way, right? Where you can
Yeah.
kind of take from it what you need in order to like find the story satisfying. So again, really smart choice in the character
Yeah. I
itself.
agree. I agree. Yeah, so this book, Carrie, you found a review on Goodreads that you texted me.
The
But
best
like,
Goodreads review I've read in years.
do you want to read just the highlights that you texted?
Let me see
Or
if I can find it
I
real
can
quick.
find it if you can't.
It's not that far back in our text messages. Oh, it was pretty classic though.
It
Oh, okay, I
was.
found it.
Okay.
Unhinged and out there, but entertaining. Put Blue Lagoon, abusive Christian pastors. Ancient Egypt, Lindsay Lohan playing twins Annie and Hallie. Hilaria Baldwin. Reincarnation, scary vagina dentata caves, and swinger style sex therapy in a blender, and you'd get this. It's like,
Incredible.
you know what? Nailed it.
Nailed it. Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
good.
this book
So
was
good.
like it was one of those ones where I loved it and at the end I was like, what did I just read? It's like I liked it and I was also just like, damn,
Yeah.
like there's so much that went into this and she totally pulled it off and
Yeah.
it could have
Yeah.
gone off the rails many times, right? Like they're with
Mhm.
all these elements like and it's a difficult thing to pull all of this together and I mean, I love a good like scary cave too. So the fact that Thea is terrified of caves, and then we know she's gonna end up in the cave in the end. But yeah, I
Well, I
just
think, that again, that like having the space for in Thea as a character to question and
yeah,
also be like, "Hey, I see what you're doing here therapy wise. Like this is actually they're taking true therapy techniques, things that actually do work and they're just using them like manipulatively and badly." And also but like her like rationality but yet also like not like sometimes she's not and that's very relatable too, right? So, I think without that and also this is I didn't mention this but the fact that every time we think Thea things are getting really bad you should leave and she doesn't normally like you could get super frustrated with a character but I think what a smart thing she did to save it was she always left that with Thea to make that choice because she has other characters she has Soul Moon Jonah, like all the people being like, "Oh, you want to leave? Yeah, we'll leave. We'll call you a taxi right now." Like it wasn't call you. We'll drive you to the airport tomorrow. Of course, we know in the end there was no way they would have let her
right,
go. But they're like she could have gotten on the little shuttle or whatever with Mickey and Remy it was Ramit, right? Yes. And
yeah,
Dawn,
Remy and
or at
Dawn,
least
yeah,
they were saying, like, yeah, you want to go with them? Go ahead. Like, it was always, and we'll never push you to do anything we're not comfortable with. And then, of course,
right,
they do the thing, but it's always wrapped in the guise of consent. And I think that just made you feel a little bit better too about, like, even though, okay, they're probably lying, but she's still making choices to stay. And
yeah,
she's still skeptical when we need her to be skeptical and all of those things. She's doing a lot of lifting as a main character to carry us through
she
places
is,
in the story where we might otherwise be like, oh no way.
yeah. Well, and with all those choices, we avoid the this happened to her.
Yes.
Right? Because she is at the whim of these people. She's being manipulated as soon as she gets there, um, by all these people
Yep.
and every single person, basically, except for
Yeah.
Mickey and, the like side characters. But like, yeah, we're on her side as she makes these bad decisions because we understand why she's making them. Like as you just
Yep.
said, she rationalizes it.
Yep.
One thing I just thought of is at the very end, when she manipulates everybody into killing themselves, basically, that's as a therapist, a complicated choice,
Certainly is.
but
Certainly is.
it's like she's conquered her deep wound, right?
Hmm.
And realized what she needs to about it, which is like she's not going to let the anger control her life. She's not going to let it control her life going forward, which is so powerful and such a good emotional aha. Um, what she does with it is decide she's going to get out of there and do what she needs to do. And
Survival. Yeah.
yes, I personally adore a story like this where we have a character who's like, what did she say? I read it again, but it was, my desire to help covering up my desire to harm,
Hmm.
and she decides to harm, but it's for a very good reason, and that's to save her and the people that she wants to save, like Mickey. And they lose Sebastian, right? He dies. He gets stabbed by Clint
Steven?
in the Steven, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, they lose Stephen. They lose Karen too,
They
right?
lost Karen. Yes.
Who
Yeah.
was sketchy for a long time, but then turned out to be the person who brought Clint back, right?
Right. Right.
So she ended up kind of saving
And
everybody
then we
in
lose
some way.
Clint. Clint
Yes,
also dies. Yeah,
yeah,
so like everybody dies except for
pretty
Mickey.
much.
And, they get out, but the choice to have somebody who works in the medical field decide to actively manipulate a delusion in order to save herself is, I think, a very cool choice for the
Well,
end.
and we're all at this point, they have we think, at least I, think that Moon has killed Talia.
Yeah,
She has shoved Catherine into the cave. They've manipulated Grace into jumping into the cave and dying.
they killed
Uh,
Talia's dog.
they killed Talia's dog, which is not okay on any level, of course. So we are not like when Moon went off the side of the tower, I was like, good freaking
I
riddance.
know.
Bye. I was
Yeah, we're
sad that
totally.
like Catherine wasn't getting, but like that's, I was also like, okay, it probably had to end here in some ways, like to really so yeah, she's using this, it turned into like a little mini revenge fantasy there in the end, and I think we were all here for it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that final line, I'd broken the pattern. Like I
Mhm.
took that when on the second read as like, oh, I'd had my emotional realization and I'd broken my own patterns. But
Right.
as we're talking about this now, I'm like, she could be referring to breaking the pattern of the reincarnation stuff.
Oh, I think it all fits under
Yeah,
there. That's like the genius of it, is like it works on a few different levels
that's
as
great.
yeah, it is really, really well done.
Yeah.
So
So, Julia Bartz,
thank
thank you for writing
you.
your unhinged book. Please write more.
Indeed.
I adored it. And thank you to everyone for listening, for hanging out with us. Just shy of an hour per usual.
Hey, yeah, we did it.
And we appreciate you. And if you want to hang out with us more, shadowsandsecrets.com. And we
Check
appreciate
out
you
the
being here.
retreats, check out the
Yeah.
society.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. We'll catch you next time.